are almost becoming a relic of the past, with fewer and fewer games featuring big bads, but they're not gone and forgotten yet. This year had a few awesome standout boss fights that challenged you in new ways, including the final boss of Wolfenstein, which offered up a nice surprise throwback for fans of the series, as well as the bevy of tactics and planning that you'd have needed to gather up in order to take out the numerous bosses of Transistor. But here are my 5 picks for best boss fights of 2014. A boss fight isn't necessarily good because the boss is particularly hard or that it has a sweet design. It needs to offer you something more than that. Like, I don't know, for example, respawning all the major bosses of a region for an all-out assault. Early on in Divinity Original Sin, before your party is beefy as shit, you need to face off against Brachus Rex. That on its own would be dealable, but he's brought along the poison-laced ghoul that guards the lighthouse, the fiery twins by Firejoined, and Diederik, the sword-wielding Baron of Bones. They've all got lists of strengths and vulnerabilities as long as their names, so you need to be careful about which attacks to use when and where, and try not to get hemmed in by the lot of them. On the plus side, this difficult level 9 fight prepares you extremely well for the rest of the game by demanding a mastery of the elemental system, by teaching you that fire explodes poison, oil casts slow, and so on. Destiny might seem like a contentious choice, but its first raid, Vault of Glass, is surprisingly engaging. The 6-player raid consists of 3 stages: opening the vault, offing the Templar, and launching an assault on the Glass Throne in order to kill Atheon, the final boss. Easy, right? No! Not easy. The raid is filled with a bunch of game mechanics that were nowhere to be seen in the main game. New enemy types, puzzles to solve, and an instance where your party gets separated at random. None of this is ever explained, and the first group to finish the raid allegedly took over 8 hours to work it out. Like any good boss fight, the Vault of Glass is particularly clever in the way that it forces you to adapt and learn new situations, and really work as a team in order to come out alive. It probably comes as no surprise that Bayonetta 2 is filled with epic bosses. The batshit crazy game is just overflowing with larger-than-life foes, but here's some of the best. Even though you'll probably just be using your tried and true combos and witch time tactics to take out, well, everybody, the design and scope of these baddies is insane. There's towering infernal dragon creatures who dwarf your leggy protagonist, mighty and well-equipped angels, as well as speedy enormous spiders. Each fight ends in a unique climax finishing move which really cements its status as over the top. It's difficult to say whether Bayonetta 2's bosses are lovely or ludicrous in this regard, but whichever way you look at the plethora of gargantuan villains, they certainly belong on this list. Shovel Knight is another game that is just packed with awesome bosses, but none are more tough or fun than the final boss, the Enchantress. The awesome thing about the face-off between Shovel Knight and the Enchantress is that you aren't alone. At this point in the game, you've rescued your beloved Shield Knight after countless trials, and he or she fights by your side and acts as a necessary part of this battle, a feature that solidifies how essential she is to your protagonist in the narrative. It's a tricky set of 3 stages that involve dodging fireballs and jumping off Shield Knight's shield to get to higher ground. The battle is also incredibly worth it for the payoff, an unexpectedly touching final sequence. Finally and inevitably, we have Dark Souls 2, the champion series of badass bosses whose lives are dedicated to messing you up. And they do, repeatedly. There are loads of worthy adversaries in the Souls series, and Dark Souls 2 delivered some awesome ones. The Pursuer, who you may be incredibly unlucky to encounter early on, does his very best to chop you up into tiny little pieces with his adept sword and shield skills. The incredibly unfair Ruin Sentinels will have you throwing your controller across the room if you don't bring along some friends. And then there's the Smelter Demon. For a lot of people, he's the worst of the lot, with devastating and quick blows from his flaming sword. One of the very coolest though has to be the Executioner's Chariot, a roaring horse-drawn chariot that tries to bowl you over. Your only respite from the red-eyed shadow horses are to hide in small alcoves until you can work out what to do. As with everything in Dark Souls, you can't hide forever. That is it for my picks. Be sure to let me know which video game battle of 2014 was your favorite, and I'll catch you again next week.